I
There
think,
are those buttons.
yeah, it's now recording.
It's now recording, okay. Oh, I'm not sure. Now I want to record, yeah. Please ask permission. Okay. Okay, it's recording.
In the left corner.
Yes, there's a little red thing there. You can see it's recording.
Yeah. So I think this first question would cover what you were saying. So the first question I've got to you to begin, if not asking you so much, could you tell us here in Brazil, in general terms, where your work is focused? I mean, research and clinical work, where your work is focused?
Well, when I started to learn ACT, I really used the 6 processes, Steve's Hexaflex and the 6 processes. And I used those to train myself. There wasn't much material out in those days. The matrix wasn't out yet. And I used those processes and read and studied and had supervision and tried it out in my own practice. I was doing REBT just before that.
Okay.
And so there were parts which were very similar. There were parts which were very different. And I was very happy with the diffusion aspect as opposed to the challenging and didactic, what do you call it, the challenging. Because I found with REBT that although people would relate to the challenging and they would, yes, it makes sense and all of that, when they actually needed it the most, it would go out the window and they wouldn't be able to use it. And I remember a lawyer who I trained with the REBT form of challenging. And he said, it's absolutely brilliant. It makes total sense. And then he came back to me and he said, when his wife gets emotional and starts screaming and shouting at him, it all goes out of his head. So I thought that this is what attracted me to ACT, is that challenging doesn't, when you need it most, it doesn't work. So I focused on diffusion to start off with. And it was interesting to me that one of the most notable to me is that it's see the world as it is and not as you want it to be or think it should be, but not with the harshness of REBT, not as in, it's not awful and why shouldn't I, etc. Not with that, but actually that the reality for a Christian is God's way.
Yeah.
So what's happening on the earth is what God's plan and how God's working. And I started to collect verses. I read the Bible through every year, the whole way through. And so as I was reading, I would see a verse and say, there's diffusion. Be conformed to the world, but be transformed. And sorry, it's unstable, but you can still hear me, right?
Yeah, I missed the part when you tell about diffusion in the Bible, if you can.
Yeah, I found the Bible explained it so perfectly. Romans 12:2 says, be not conformed to the world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. And I'd often had this verse preached or heard that they were saying in a kind of a CBT way, change your thinking. Don't think that way. Stop it. And, think the way God wants you to think. And I started to check these verses with a lexicon, a Greek and Hebrew lexicons, to see where did these words originally come from. And that word transformed in Romans 12:2 is metamorphos, which is metamorphosis, the basis of metamorphosis, and how a caterpillar turns into a butterfly. And the caterpillar doesn't work hard to turn himself into a butterfly. He just builds a cocoon and sits inside, and God changes him into a butterfly. And so I looked at this word and I thought, right, so instead of taking what the world says as being the truth, cocoon yourself and let God do the transformation. So that was the diffusion beginning for me, is seeing the world as it truly is, as God says it is, not as the newspapers say it is, or the TV, or other people, or because there's a lot to be afraid of, isn't there? There's a lot happening to be afraid of. But when we know who's got the world in his hands and who knows the future, we can still be afraid, but it's not that terror, because he's got something planned. And yeah, so that was diffusion, and then I went on to acceptance, and so I built up a whole spreadsheet of the 6 processes with the verses that relate to them.
Okay, and could you give me some example where you use it with a client, for instance?
Yeah. The model, I eventually brought it into a model which is based on Matthew 11:28-30, which is, come unto me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. And that I made what I called a Christoflex, which was based on the Hexaflex. And Steve has never commented on it. I don't know what he thinks. And present moment awareness is Jesus, come unto me. Because when you are really in a bad place and you really, really need to focus on the present moment and be where you are, what better way for a Christian than to say, oh, but Jesus is here. So go unto him with a consciously attend to him.
Okay.
And in that, it then changes your perspective of self. Because then I'm no longer weak and ineffectual, because I've got God's grace available to me. And that's the upright of the cross.
Okay.
Yeah. And that works well, I've found, with people, because when they are, let's say, running in their heads, running and scared, and they're talking to me, and I've done these processes with them, all I've got to do sometimes is say, come unto me. And the person stops. And okay. So it's a verbal cue, it's a contextual cue that indicates, I suppose it's something about the function of your behavior right now as well. What is the function of this? It's to remind yourself of what your worldview is, not the worldview that we're constantly given, but your worldview as a Christian.
Yeah, nice. Really nice the way you use this contextual cue. Do you see it as a transformation of function?
I do. In whatever is in the present moment, and I might have to do something. There might be a fire or an accident, or there might be something I have to do, and so the function of my behavior will be dealing with a crisis. But I'm not doing it alone. I'm not too sure about the whole thing, so I'm thinking my way through it. Did I get that right in terms of transformation of function? Because then it becomes, this is what I've found in situations like that since then, it then becomes more of, it goes from, I've got to think of what to do to save this situation, to help in this situation. And the function becomes more, right, I've got assistance, I've got someone here, the person who knows the beginning from the end. Lord, tell me what to do, and I'll do it.
Okay. I'm seeing my clients. When you were saying all of that, I was seeing my clients. Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And I use the Message Bible a lot because the translations are so easy. It's the English translation. It's not actually a translation. It's a interpretation. And this guy, Eugene Peterson, he worked in the very slum areas of New York, and he found himself having to recite the Bible for people who were not very educated, not very well off. And so he had to put it into words that people understood. And he did it so well that they asked him, wouldn't he write out a Bible for them so that they could understand it the way he was explaining it?
Right.
And so that's where the Message Bible comes from. And I love the description of what I call willing acceptance and diffusion. Because in the Message Bible, that's verse 29, it says, walk with me and work with me, watch how I do it. And the diffusion, learn the unforced rhythms of grace. And with Christians, when we talk about how in other versions, verse 29 is about a yoke. It says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me. And as I understand it, that refers to, when you take a oxen and you put a yoke over them so they can pull the plow and work in the fields. And what we do here usually is you get an old, experienced ox who's also very strong. And then you get the young guy who's very frisky and wants to play. And the old ox says, no, we're going this way. We're going to work in the fields. And that is really what Jesus did. He set his face like a flint for Jerusalem. He didn't flinch. He did what needed to be done. He willingly accepted the pain that went with it in order not to waste his time struggling. He didn't struggle. He just went on and did it.
Nice. Really nice.
Yeah.
And
So I like that verse. I think it's it's in John 6:33, where he says, in this world you will have trouble. You will. So I have an issue with Christians who believe that we should be rich and prosperous and have no health issues, and because that's not what the Bible says.
do you think it seems to be like the vision of Buddha of suffering?
I'm not really too clear on what that is. Can you tell me?
So it seems to be the same. I need to be careful to begin discuss about religion, because our aim
That's
here
okay.
is that. But I'm not so familiar with Buddha's teaching, but I remember me reading something like, there's always suffering. Suffering is part of life.
Yes, I remember reading that. Yes, I suppose it is similar to that. Just if I could just on an aside mention what you said about you need to be careful with the different religions and so on. It's been an interesting journey for me in the ACBS because I have learned not to argue. I have learned to be very accepting. I have learned to say to people, this is what I believe. I don't have certainty. I cannot give you certainty, but this is what I believe, and it's the way I have chosen to conduct my life. Now, I can say to you that I have experiential proof, which I believe I have, very much so, tons of it. But that doesn't mean that you have to believe what I believe just because I have experiential proof that what I've chosen to believe works for me.
Okay.
And that's helped a lot within the ACBS community.
Yeah.
Because it means that there isn't the arguing, there isn't the contention. We're not in frames of opposition. We're actually in frames of coordination because
Yeah.
it's about belief. We're talking about belief. So you believe, I believe, we're talking about belief. We're not talking about opposition.
And we are the same. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
And nice when you say that we are in frames of coordination, because it was I felt in Seville this year really big frames of coordination, people just accepting and
Great.
giving support. Nice.
Great.
Okay. So my mind is telling me that my English is not good enough, as always. So if you have some doubt, ask me again, okay?
Okay, I just want to say something. Your English is far better than my Spanish.
Nice.
And I'm understanding you perfectly.
Oh, nice. Thank you. So,
You're
okay.
welcome.
Another question that I've got is, do you notice differences between Christians and non-Christians clients?
Non-Christians, that last word I didn't get. I didn't understand the last word you said. Do I notice a difference between Christian and non-Christian? Did you say clients?
Yes, as if you notice difference between these two different types of clients, Christians and non-Christians.
No, not really. If anything, the Christians who become clients have got an issue with God not giving them everything they want. Whereas non-Christians don't have those issues. Well, not as deeply and as specifically. You know, there will sometimes, I've got one lady who's got this thing about fate, you know, so if three things have gone wrong, then God will now give her a little bit of time of, you know, happiness. And but she's not a Christian. So I don't know, I find actually many clients have got some kind of a thing about a God, gods, angels, Buddha, Hindus, something. Very few people I've met actually, there's no God, that's it. Boom.
Okay. Okay. And so I know that could be so general, but in your practice, could you say that faith helps the acceptance process, or it get worse?
Both. I think it depends a lot upon the teaching that the person gets within the church. And there's a lot of people on the internet now preaching, and they invariably preach a God who is a bit like a slot machine. You put in a prayer or a bit of money and out will come what you want from him.
Okay.
And Christians who've got that idea of faith means get what I want. I have a lot of trouble with them. A lot of trouble with acceptance, a lot of trouble with the willing to go into the pain because there is no other way. I deal a lot with Christians who are very hard on themselves. That is probably the biggest difference, is the judgmentalism of Christians of themselves and of others. Very, very hard on themselves as a set of rules, which breaks my heart, because that's why Jesus came, was to abolish the rules and to make it great, to give us grace and let us live by grace with not the rules stand, but grace is the way in which to uphold and live with the rules. But people are very quick to state the rule and condemn themselves and others for not following the rule. And that happens a lot with Christians, a lot.
Okay.
Take, for example, alcohol. You'll get you'll get a person who is aware that they have a problem with alcohol, but that's just a problem. That's a level of problem. And so you are helping them with that behavior to, look at long-term, not short-term, and all of the things that you do. But then with Christians, you've got an extra layer of condemnation. So not only are they condemning themselves, but they're being condemned by other Christians. And that's very hard to deal with.
Yeah, I see. Okay. So, and in our earlier conversations in the Facebook, I don't know if you remember, but we've talked about OCD and rule-governed behavior. And
yeah,
do you see a link between OCD, rule-governed behavior, and Christianity?
yes, I do. I don't think that I have ever had a patient, a client with OCD who didn't have an issue with God. I don't think there may be, but there's always this figure overlooking what they do, even when no one else sees it. And this whole, reward and punishment system, and that the rules, rule-governed behavior, most definitely at its peak, with even the rules I don't even know the rules. There's so many rules, I don't even know them, but I'm going to have to be very, very careful that I don't, because this overseer is going to notice if I make a mistake.
Okay. And how they justify this aversive control?
Well, I think it's the view of God as a judge.
Okay.
The God of love. I don't know if you've had the charismatic renewal in Brazil. I think you have.
Yeah.
The charismatic churches and the Holy Spirit revival and all of that. And that people became excited because they found that God is a God of love, that he gives, that he takes care of people and he gives things, and he gives health. Sometimes he'll heal you, he'll give happiness, he'll give wealth. Sometimes he's a giving God. And we have this mentality as human beings that we have to earn it. Even people who have entitlement feeling, they've earned that. They've earned the right to entitlement, and we find it really hard to understand grace, that we can actually be given something that we did nothing to earn it. And so conversely, there's nothing we can do to lose it. Because there's nothing we can do to get it. Therefore, there's nothing we can do to lose it. And that is mind-blowing for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I have, sorry.
No, when you were saying that, I began to think about the coherence process that we must have inside our brains, and how they deal with it, because everything must be categorized, and when we talk about it, it's hard to see a category. So it must be here and it must be there, and sometimes we don't have this certainty of things. You know what
and
I mean?
I think I do, because I got a little bit lost there in the discussion, but I want to take it back now to faith, because I think that's where it went from, is that I was saying some people have got that kind of faith that everything's got to go right for them. And there's a different kind of faith, and that is faith in the grace of God, that even if things go very wrong, God is still in control.
Okay.
So the kind of faith that Paul had when he wrote, and he said, I know that I'm going to die soon, but that's gain for me. When he was in Jerusalem and they said to him, don't go to Rome, he said, don't hold me back, I'm going. I know what's awaiting me there, but I'm still going.
Okay.
That faith of, I know why I'm doing what I'm doing, and it may not make sense to anyone in the world, but I know why I'm doing it.
Okay, maybe a definition of values and a wholehearted people. But I don't know. You can see this way. Is that what you mean, or the opposite?
That's what I mean. That's what I mean. As if it's like your whole life becomes in this circle of God being there and God's will and God's guidance, and He's there. So whatever I do, whether it's decide what to wear or whether it's decide what house to buy, God is there.
Nice. And so I have other questions here, but one question that came from me now is, and in this approach, how is your view of self as context? I'm curious to learn a little bit about that from your perspective.
Okay. I think that I've moved to self as perspective, really. And that, first of all, can I go back in a little bit as to how this has developed, certainly in my work, is that the first time I did mindfulness, I was in one of Robin Walsh's workshops, and it was the most incredible experience, and I ended up missing the entire workshop because I just stayed where I was in mindfulness. And I was vaguely aware of Robin saying to people, just leave her alone, she's fine. And at the end of it, I was, wow, this was in Texas. And I thought, I have never experienced God like that before, ever. I've done courses, I've had training, I've been to church, I've listened to sermons, I've read books, you name it, I've done it, and never experienced God like I did there. And it was almost as if God and I were having a conversation. And there was nothing wrong with me or bad about me or that mattered how I looked or the fact that I was still sitting in the windowsill and everybody else was doing things and looking at me. None of that mattered. And I came away from that and thought, wow, is that really how I am to God? That, I'm just this person who he converses with. And that was, I suppose, my first thing of self as context. And so I started to realize that self-judgment was my worst enemy and the greatest thing that holds me back in life. And so I purposefully, in the present moment, and this is where Jesus in the present moment grew from for me, is that in the present moment, no matter what I'm doing, no matter what I've just done, if I start to take the perspective of being in this moment with Jesus, then I start to change and my perspective of me starts to change. So I'll give you an example. Somebody was really very bad to me in a supermarket parking lot, and I completely lost my temper. And then I was ashamed, and I got back in the car and I sat there and I thought, Lord, how embarrassing was that? I should never have behaved like that. And I just really, in that present moment, felt the Lord saying to me, yes, you should have. Because all the elements were there for you to do exactly what you've just done. And now let's look at that and say, okay, you were scared. That's why you lost your temper, because you were afraid. And so he's helped me with that. Do you see what I'm getting at? So I see my behavior from it's my self as context. Within the context, I'm starting to see that I'm okay. It doesn't mean I don't have to change. I've got lots of changing to do. But I don't live feeling ashamed and down and, even if I'm doing something that other people would look at me and say, whoa, she calls herself a Christian. I'd say, okay, I do, but I'm still a sinner.
Nice. I'm trying to figure all of that. Yeah, nice. And so, Ingrid, I've been facing some struggles. So I don't know. I really don't like to pathologize people. Who knows me know that I don't like to categorize people into DSM disorders. But just to make it more clear, okay? I've been facing some struggles working with personality disorders, especially with schizotypal personality. This condition seems poorly insensitive to behavioral consequences. Have you worked with this kind of client?
I didn't quite catch what personality disorder you're talking about.
Schizotypal.
Oh, okay. Yes, I have. And as you say, they seem to be particularly insensitive to behavioral consequences.
Yes.
Which makes it extremely difficult to work with them. And the only, especially with Christian, the success, if I say that I've had is again to be with Jesus. I had a client in the UK, and his behavior was extremely destructive to both himself and his family. And he was a Christian. And we stepped backwards in each. I hadn't even done Matthew's course yet, but in terms of the ABCs, so that we got to the earliest warning sign that he had, that something was going to happen. Because they're always there. That's what I've found. There's a pattern that begins, and they know what, when you bring it to awareness, that pattern comes out. And then what we did with him is he had a safe room. He had a study that nobody else would go into, and they wouldn't disturb him. Once he went in there and shut the door, everybody knew, leave him completely alone. And then he would play calm classical music and read his books. And sometimes he would be in there for 2 or 3 days. And so that's really what I found. And with a Christian, and as I say, he's a Christian, was just in that moment come into an awareness of Jesus with you, and just ask him to be with you. Just to be with you.
Okay. Yes, because it's really hard for me working with this kind of client. Yes.
It's very hard work. It's very, very hard work, especially if they're resistant.
Yes. So, and there is a new book coming here.
Sorry, say that again?
There is a new book coming here from you. You are writing or you have finished?
Yes, no, I haven't finished. I am in the 4th month of Matthew's course. And after the 6 months, I haven't asked him yet. And I may be privileged enough for him to say yes, that I would like him to edit the chapters as I write them, so that I can write about RFT CBS for Christians. And so it certainly won't be soon, but I'm hoping it'll be this year.
Okay, I read a little bit about, and this seems to combine mindfulness, RFT. Is that what is coming for us in your new book?
I don't know. Is it an institute in America that's doing this?
I read it in your website, in that website you sent me.
Combining, well, I've done a recording of mindfulness meditation for Christians.
Ah, okay.
Is that?
Yes, yeah.
And the reason why I did it was because it's very specific with Christians.
Okay.
Mindfulness mindfulness from a secular point of view is whatever you make it, whatever it is. But Christian meditation is specifically focusing on God, Jesus, the Bible, whatever. And
Okay. And so do you have something else to...
Have you got the recording?
Yes.
I just want to ask you, do you have that recording?
Can you ask again, please?
Do you have that recording?
That recording?
Do you have the recording of mindfulness and Christian meditation?
No.
It's an MP3. Would you like it? All right.
Okay, if you can send it to me, it would be really nice.
Oh, okay. Would you like that? Can you give me have I got your email address?
So I can spell it to you. It's
Yeah.
Paulo
Yeah.
Boza, B-O-Z.
ZZA.
Yes.
All one word.
And 86.
Yeah. Gmail.com.
Yeah, gmail.com.
Okie doke. I'll send it to you.
Thanks a lot. Do you have another other advice for us here in Brazil? You know, there's a lot of Christians here. Maybe.
Yeah, I do. I would like to really emphasize that difference in faith that we were talking about. That, you know, grace is such an incredible resource available to Christians. But you have to have humility and you have to have faith. Because if you don't have humility, then you're not open and curious to what God has in store for you. And if you don't have faith, then you're not listening for His perspective on who you are, yourself as context in the moment. So there are times when great things can be done through you, but you'll miss the moment if you're not curious and open and have faith to just take that leap, do it.
Okay, nice. So I'm wondering to see. So I don't have yet your book, but I'm gonna buy it. Of course, I wanna read
You don't
it.
have
No.
No, I'll send you the PDF. I'll send you the PDF of the book.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
And I'll send you the MP3.
Thanks a lot.
You're very welcome.
I really appreciate
You're welcome. And I would really like feedback. I would really like you to keep in touch. I would really like to know what you think. And, you know, I can always have meetings with the community there. We could do a kind of a joint supervision thing, or if people wanted to talk with me, I'm always happy to do that.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah. And so thanks a lot for giving all this information for us, because
You're very welcome.
I'm intending to show this for other people, maybe in my YouTube channel, maybe for my student. And I'm really pleased for your posture. You know, one thing that I've been noticing is that ACBS members are more open to this kind of thing.
Yes.
And when I first talked to you and you say, okay, we can arrange a date. Oh, nice. It's so fast this way. So I really appreciate all of that. Thanks a lot for being here.
You're very welcome. Thank you for being interested, because this is my life. This is what I believe I've been put on the earth for. And I love every moment of it.
And please keep the good work. Keep the good work.
Thank you, Paolo. Thank you so much. I will.
Okay. So,